Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and we are taking the... I couldn't read the name of the scenario, and I forgot what I called it, but... This is what you guys asked for. This is episode 83. Summertime... something or other. Whatever the title is, that's the name of the scenario. So... the description, if you stopped and paused and read it, or if you didn't, it's to take some passengers and some freight down from Caps Junction to Temaros. The passengers will transfer onto the standard gauge and go all the way down to Old Orchard Beach. The whole story behind this scenario is that it is summer, it is beach season, and the people who live up here in the mountains and work in the logging camps are going on a day trip, going on vacation. So, that's that. There's a... I can't actually see the cuts the way I arranged this. Hold on. I'm arranging my screen so I can see what's going on, or what's going to go on, a little bit better. Because I've never done the video like this before. So, I'm really just getting used to this again because I haven't driven in cab mode in a long time. And, I'm trying to get the hang of driving the engine again. This engine in particular is very nice. It's easy to get used to. The one problem is the throttle doesn't have a lot of different points. It only works in quarters, so you have 0, 25, 50, 75, and 100% of the throttle. So it's tough to keep the thing going slowly without really utilizing the cutoff, which is good because it goes all the way up to 90%. Also, I was having this issue where I really wanted the engine to start rolling down this hill, and it refused. So, I don't know. I was wondering if I was going to... I was wondering if it was going to fight me while I was driving down. I was going to insist that the engine wanted to roll uphill, because in this case it seemed like it did. But standard procedure here, trying to get far enough away from the switch, which is taking a bit of effort. And rolling a little ways out onto the Y, putting us back into forward, and then bringing the engine up to our consist, which we don't pick up any freight here yet. The consist that we need, the consist that we're taking, is actually that, there are two coaches and a combine sitting on the second track there. Now, I did go through and populate almost all of the narrow gauge portions of the map, but I didn't sit down and spend the probably hour it would have taken to do Galgora and Temaros, mostly because we don't spend nearly enough time in those locations for it to necessarily make any sense to do all that work. Most of the video, the most important part and the most interesting part, is all in the narrow gauge here. And, now, we've been to Caps Junction before, and it really doesn't look very different, especially this end of it. Because we haven't made the attachments to anywhere, so the scenery going off in those two directions, which is the east-west main line, doesn't really matter. So we're gonna very gingerly ease these coaches out here back onto the Y, because I don't want to accidentally roll down into the main line. Not that there's going to be any traffic to intercept, but something that you generally don't want to do. I do start getting a little bit bolder later, significantly, when we get to Temaros, and you'll see that. But for now I need to ease the combine back past that switch, which is, once again, proving difficult, but now it's easier. I'm getting the hang of it. Something I found, and I could have probably brought up later when we're going all the way down to Old Orchard Beach, is the fact that, on steam engines at least, using the throttle and reverser is far more responsive than the brakes. I feel like the brakes are when you really need to stop and you're coming in, I don't know, quickly or slowly, I don't know, when you're coming into a place and you have a wide margin for error, then you can use the brakes alone. On the other hand, using the cutoff and throttle gives you very quick reaction time, and with this engine it gives you a significant amount of power to do whatever you want. So we're just leaving Caps Junction here. We've picked up all the passengers that the passing through train dropped off, although in reality this would be the passing through train. Caps Junction wouldn't be the starting point for any train. But we're going to head out into the tunnel here, into that little mountain range that isn't quite finished yet, because I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what it has to look like, because I don't know what the scenery around it is. So we're going to go through and leave Caps Junction and enter the tunnel and enter the textured portion of the map, or at least most of it. So coming out of that same tunnel on the other side, entering the nicer areas of the map, you need to adjust that bridge a little bit. But that's what you see when you're kind of working on this stuff. We're going to stick with the train for a little while here as I try and guide us down into the bowl. The Capsed Bowl, I guess you could call it. I'm not really sure what we're going to name it. Don't have a reference for you to put it here, and I don't have a way to remember the reference right now anyways. Normally I put track marks, but there isn't necessarily anything significant right there. So again, using the cutoff to control the speed. Again, using the reverser in this engine much more significantly than the throttle, because the throttle is so imprecise. I'm sorry I couldn't salvage the audio. I made the mistake of not remembering that this would be a video where the audio is important. Listen to a podcast anyways, and of course that went over all of the audio, and I did my best to salvage it. I used several of the Audacity tools to try and get the voice out, but every time you heard the engine chuffing, there would be some voice in the background or electronic noise, or it would sound muffled, which was very disappointing, unfortunately, because of the effort I put in to fix the audio, but I inevitably had to discard it. But we're coming into a long passing siding here, along the big cut and above the river. I am noting finally how nice this place is turning out. You know, it looks very funny to have the engine in such a comparatively tiny train. Now we're down at Grizzly Lumber. We've dropped off the coaches, and we're ready to pick up the first of the freight, or the only of the freight, in this section. Or in this, in all the scenario that we got done. We got done one of the two, or well, I guess you could say 3 of the 4 points. One of them was delivering the passengers down to Temaros, the other one delivering the logs to Temaros, delivering the passengers to Old Orchard Beach, and then delivering the goods back to Susquehanna. So those 2 things, or those 4 things were the inevitable goals for the scenario. And we did get 3 out of 4 of them done in the hour of filming that I set aside, and then wanted to cut it down to a video. But I did have some finicky trouble. This is when I was really learning about how to control the train properly, and how to be more precise. Because I was bringing the engine in here with the coaches. Keep an eye on how much coal and water we have, just in case I need to stop in Susquehanna, which I didn't. And really having to be finicky because the actual area for loading the logs is kind of minuscule, and you can't do 2 at once. So I believe I got the 4th, then the 2nd, then the first, then the 3rd, then the 5th. Because I kept sliding a little bit too far to get them all in a row. And the first time I went in there, I kind of slid past the platform entirely, which is the first out of 2 times I do that in the video, and the only time that I show it, thank goodness. So I'm just fiddling with controls significantly. I did cut out a lot of the uninteresting or setup parts, but it was the area. This is one of these sections, as well as the very beginning, that I decided to leave in, where I'm actually doing significant amounts of work. I want to say there are 4 sections like that, and I can tell that just by looking at where the largest cuts are. There's the beginning, there's this, there's Squeaka, and then there's Temaros. Or departing Temaros, I should say. So that's 2 out of 5 log cars loaded. That makes 6 logs so far out of the 15. And I'm using the coaches over there as a gauge as to how far and how fast we're moving. Because, of course, I don't have any windows in the rear of the engine because there's a giant coal bunker there. And I don't have a way to lean out of the window and still access the controls. Nor do I know the keyboard shortcuts. I started learning a couple of them as I went through the video. I'd actually forgotten how to turn off the HUD as well. But I figured that out. So using the cutoff and kind of throwing it back and forth in order to move forward and back relatively quickly. Of course, what's very helpful is right now this is a very, very overpowered train. To pull something this insignificant, you'd probably want even a consolidation would do. I'm not sure getting it back up the hill would be doable or ideal, but on the way down you could use a consolidation, or maybe even something smaller. So now we're passing through Skyfall Ridge. We're joining with the older section of the main line, or the older section of the Temaros branch, actually. Passing through Skyfall Ridge and meeting with the other track there that's only used when we have a train that will have trouble getting through the Skyfall cutoff. Really, it should be the caps cutoff, I think. I need to make a decision on what all these things are named, write them down somewhere, something like that. I need to do that with a lot of things. So once again, adjusting our speed using throttle, and the cutoff, the regulator, and the reverser. Surprisingly, I was surprised at how fast the engine could get up to, what the top speed actually was. I turned the derailment on arcade because I did want to have some threat of screwing up, but I didn't want to actually ruin the video. Normally I keep the derailment on realistic in case, or just to kind of keep myself under wraps. So we're coming into Squeaka. We're going to be passing over the 2-foot gauge line and the river that's right there. The coal fields are up and to our left. Which, you know, they don't have huge production, but they're very important for the Temaros branch because they are the coaling stop on the Temaros branch. Temaros itself, of course, doesn't have any facilities for servicing locomotives other than what they use to keep their little switcher running. And of course all of the supplies are borrowed from the big Temaros Van Anaconda Railway roundhouse that is sitting across the way. So we're coming in the outer lane of the passing siding where we don't brush the coal and water tower, which is procedure when you're not stopping there. Bringing ourselves to a halt at Squeaka. in order to let more passengers board, because of course these people need to go to the beach too, and to let anyone that wasn't going all the way down get off. Not that there's too much to see here, but it is a destination for hikers, because you can go up into the mountains straight from here. On some days, on days in the spring and the fall, there's a shuttle that runs from Temaros if the freight service is lower, or if it isn't a high point in the day for the narrow gauge. They hook up a coach or a combine that's been left around to the switcher and drive it up the mountain to here. It has the fuel to make it up and back, and then it can do one run without being refueled. I don't actually know how well that switcher does perform. I've never taken it out for anything significant. Don't tend to use the diesel switchers very much, at least on the narrow gauge. So now departing Sesquiga with the passengers and logs in tow. If you notice, we also picked up an extra combine at Grizzly Lumber. The reason for that was because that's for the workers. It was dropped off there earlier in the day, very early in the morning, for the workers to get to work, and it gets shuffled around quite often and moved back and forth very frequently. Can't see the screen. So now we're at the base of, forget what I named this mountain, but at the Y here, and the lake is right behind us. Uintah 51 and its train comes flying through on its way down on the final leg of its journey towards Temaros. Back to my point of view, I am still managing the speed as we come around the bend here, sticking close to the edge of the mountain, and paralleling the abandoned 2-foot gauge that, well, right now will be refurbished, but right now doesn't lead anywhere for both of those. One of them is a dead end, the other one is just unserviceable. Wish I had the audio. I apologize. It was nice, and I was blowing the whistle at certain points. So down in Temaros, I was just checking the switches to make sure we were doing the right thing, and then I changed my mind about precisely what we wanted to do. This is when I decided to get daring, and it could have actually cost us the scenario by doing what I'm about to do. I wanted originally to perform a flying switch in order to deposit the freight cars where they needed to go and bring the passengers to the station. Inevitably, I wasn't quick enough for the intended maneuver, but I did manage to pull one off, and you'll see that in just a second. I'm checking the switches here just to make sure everything's going to go where I need it to go. So come back here, break out the uncoupler tool, and separate the two parts of the train very quickly, jumping into the cab, screwing up, trying to get into the cab, clicking on the right thing finally, getting into the cab, and flooring it. The two halves of the train begin to separate, and that's when I realized that I sent us in the wrong direction, nonetheless. But then I figure out what I am going to do as the log cars slow down and the train picks up speed. There's thankfully just enough space in between the two consists for me to throw that switch after we pass across it. So I'm frantically clicking, throw it, and then jump into the cab, do the same thing again, jump into the cab, and slam the cutoff into full reverse. And we stop short, basically, and then begin reversing immediately. The logs slam into the goods, and I direct them towards the little shunter, hoping that the shunter will stop them if they roll that far. Fortunately, they stop pretty soon. So then we take the passengers down to the station. Over on the passenger side of Temaros, we're passing the Y here where we would turn around the train. In fact, right now the only thing that would need to be turned around is that combine at the rear because it's facing the wrong direction in order for the train to be a double-ended consist. But these passengers have just enjoyed the journey down from, not Caps Junction, truthfully, because there isn't a settlement there, but most likely either Ollerston, which is, there are a couple people that live out there, either Ollerston or Modico, or anything on that side of the map, in that general direction. Even from Scrag Cap, people could have come to go to Old Orchard Beach, which is rather famous for its waves, and come from the opposite side of the map, come in through Anaconda, change to narrow gauge at Scrag Cap, and then had to change trains to get here. So this is our other motive power. I was asked specifically to run a Fowler 4F, or a other engine that I can't pronounce, and looked like it needed to go on a diet. And I didn't have one of those anyways. So this is our motive power to bring people down to the beach. I stuffed it into the shunter siding because I didn't want to have to operate the turntable for such a small engine. Now with its consist, we're ready to depart Temaros Station. UNTOF 51 is still patiently waiting for its next orders, as it will be a while before any more passengers accumulate, and it's not yet scheduled to take the goods back up. It would be silly to run 2 trains for that purpose, especially when we don't have another engine here to do it. So I'm just checking to make sure everything is aligned for our departure. Getting back in the cab of my Fowler. And I brought back the cutoff a little bit in an effort to save steam. But, unbeknownst to me, rather it should have been, but it wasn't, the Fowler 4F has a little bit less power than the, than UNTOF 51. So we sit there for another minute or two before I, think to actually basically put it into first gear and get the thing moving. It has surprisingly large wheels for such a small engine. I didn't want to move the camera, but it kept clipping through trees, so I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So we're departing. We're going to head through the middle of the 2 passenger carriage tracks and pick up speed and depart Temaros on the main line. Or really, it's a branch line, but it's considered the main line for Galgora. Fowler has a very high whistle. She could save a soundbite of that. There's the car shop. Temaros, because even though it's a large freight changeover point and a very large engine servicing facility, it has pitiful amounts of passenger capacity, mostly because Temaros itself isn't a very large city. It's just a very important railroad location. So I decided to bring us up to maximum, because now we're on the main line and the speed limit is 80 miles per hour. And I'm gonna test the Fowler and get these passengers to their destination. Possibly the one time you see me use the injector yet. I was, of course, keeping tabs on the water level in both of the locomotives, but Uinta 51 doesn't seem to consume that much water, and it also keeps a relatively high percentage in the boiler. So this grove of trees needs a name. Realized now that that was a buffet car and was actually wondering, frankly, I can't tell apart British coaches. I can't tell apart most coaches from the outside. And the names that they were given weren't particularly helpful. I just picked which ones looked good to me. Especially behind this engine. They're all British, so I don't suppose it matters that much. So we head out of the tunnel at the base of El Dorado Canyon. On very nearly completing our journey. And I begin to slow us down as we come around this curve because the station will approach us very quickly once we make it past the bridge over that river there, which I don't remember what the name of the river was, if it had a name. It's quite narrow here versus in El Dorado, which means it's flowing very quickly into the ocean. I throw the switches to bring us into Old Orchard Beach and begin final procedures to slow us down as we pass over this last river here. And there we have it. Arrived safely at the station, 3 out of 4 mission objectives completed. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next week. Trainman out.